the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps.
Cabinet is we had our big dinner tonight before, but usually
Depends on your camera, so you can see it. That was love.
Again, you see some support for Ukraine in the First Lady's box here, including, I believe that's with her back to us right now, is the ambassador, Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. It's a very symbolic show of support by the White House and the First Lady to make sure that she was invited. And folks, my name is Graham Olkins. Appreciate you being along with us here as we cover the President's State of the Union address tonight. Again, this is President Biden's very first State of the Union address. Even though he addressed Congress last year, it was a joint session, but it was not officially called a State of the Union, and that is common after presidents first take office. Also, the attendance last year was capped at 200 people for the president's first joint address. This year, there are a lot more people. All of the senators and representatives were invited, although they were not allowed to bring additional guests. Only the White House and the First Lady allowed to invite additional guests this time around. And this also comes as President Biden's approval rating is pretty low. His approval rating going into tonight's speech, about 41% overall. His disapproval rating is at about 54%. So more people disapprove than approve of President Biden right now. And let's watch live.
The Chief Justice and Associate Justices of the Supreme Court.
All right, so not all members of the Supreme Court in attendance tonight, but some of the justices there, and including the Chief Justice. Again, we expect President Biden to likely talk about the Supreme Court and his nominee for the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who would become the first black woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Next up is the first.
Again, I was talking about President Biden's approval rating at 41% right now, his disapproval rating at 54%. There's only one president who's gone into a State of the Union speech with a lower approval rating, and that was President Trump, who went in at a net approval rating of -17. Right now, President Biden's net approval rating is at -13, as you see the First Lady come walking in as well into her box, again surrounded by, spaced out, but still surrounded by folks holding Ukrainian flags right now, shaking hands with the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., who again is the main guest of the First Lady in a very symbolic show of support for Ukraine.
Madam Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
See the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of Defense coming in as well, the Attorney General, and the rest of the President's cabinet.
I heard you need to talk to me, and I need to talk to you. So when should I call you?
Tomorrow we can. And
Okay.
I'm gonna do anything that we can. I call the few ambassadors,
Okay.
about tomorrow, but whatever. So let's move it to.
Okay. We'll do that. Hi.
Okay, how are you?
And again, just looking at a few of the topics tonight, of course, Russia, Ukraine seems to be the most pressing topic, obviously, as Russia raging war now, day 6 of the war after invading Ukraine. President expected to announce some new action against Vladimir Putin tonight as well. Of course, domestically, inflation and the U.S. economy on top of mind for many folks. The pandemic, of course, still is a huge topic. It's kind of eased up right now, the pandemic has, but the president's still expected to address that and talk about some new ways to fight fraud, pandemic-related fraud, identity theft, and folks stealing money from programs that are helping the U.S. recover. Reducing gun crime and gun violence will be a big theme tonight. And then some other programs of the president's agenda that he has not been able to get past. Federal minimum wage, increasing that to $15 an hour. The national family leave, creating a national family leave program, increasing the maximum award for Pell Grants by $2,000. The president expected to talk about that. He's expected to talk about clean energy tax credits tonight, and then also went back to the gun crime. Also going to talk about policing and trying to get more money for community policing grants, doubling the budget. The president expected to call for that. See, some senators are wearing the Ukrainian flag, the Ukrainian colors tonight on their jackets as well. And we also saw some folks holding the Ukrainian flag. One of the few times, too, that rare occasions where you can watch the Supreme Court justices interact with people. A few times that they go out in public, really.
Two of us.
Looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene there as well, who has gotten a lot of criticism this week, along with Representative Paul Gosar for speaking at an event at CPAC, the big Republican conference, conservative conference. And they have been called out by Republican leadership, those two specifically this week, for speaking at an event that was hosted by a person many consider to be a white nationalist. Get a nice wide shot of the House chamber. The usual attendance, about 1,600 for State of the Union events. Again, last year, the joint session was only 200 because of the pandemic when President Biden addressed the joint session of the Congress. This year, all of the senators, all of the representatives were invited. They were just told they were not allowed to bring additional guests this year. And in the gallery, some of those wide shots, you can see the gallery, it does seem a lot more empty tonight. And again, while we're waiting, we'll just take a look again at the official guests of the White House tonight. The most notable, Oksana Markarova, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. Also, Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower. The CEO of Intel, Paul Gelsinger. A 13-year-old diabetes advocate named Joshua Davis. And then the president's sister and the second gentleman
of the United States.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Please. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, members of Congress and the Cabinet, Justice of the Supreme Court, my fellow Americans. Last year, COVID-19 kept us apart. This year, we're finally together again. Tonight, we meet as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, but most importantly, as Americans, with the duty to one another, to America, to the American people, to the Constitution, and an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny. Thank you. 6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. From President Zelensky to every Ukrainian, their fearlessness, their courage, their determination literally inspires the world. Groups of citizens blocking tanks with their bodies, everyone from students to retirees to teachers, turned soldiers defending their homeland. And in this struggle, President Zelensky said in his speech to the European Parliament, "Light will win over darkness." The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is here tonight, sitting with the First Lady. Let each of us, if you're able to stand and send an unmistakable signal to the world of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She's bright, she's strong, and she's resolved. Yes, we, the United States of America, stand with the Ukrainian people. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving, and the cost, the threats to America and America to the world keeps rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe after World War II. The United States is a member, along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. American resolve matters. Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did. We stayed united. We prepared extensively and carefully. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents, to confront Putin. Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying our European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how he would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. Even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. To technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilked billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains. And tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy. He has no idea what's coming. The ruble has already lost 30% of its value. The Russian stock market has lost 40% of its value, and trading remains suspended. The Russian economy is reeling, and Putin alone is the one to blame. Together with our allies, we're providing support to the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. Military assistance, economic assistance, humanitarian assistance. We're giving more than $1 billion of direct assistance to Ukraine, and will continue to aid the Ukrainian people as they defend their country and help ease their suffering. But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. For that purpose, we have mobilized American ground forces, air squadrons, ship deployments to protect NATO countries, including Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And as I've made crystal clear, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch. And we're clear-eyed. The Ukrainians are fighting back with pure courage. But the next few days, weeks, and months will be hard on them. Putin has unleashed violence and chaos, but while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run. And a pound of Ukrainian people, the proud, proud people, pound for pound, ready to fight with every inch of energy they have. They've known 30 years of independence, have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. To all Americans, I'll be honest with you, as I always promised I would be. A Russian dictator invading a foreign country has cost around the world. And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy and that we use every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers. Tonight, I can announce the United States has worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. America will lead that effort, releasing 30 million barrels of our own strategic petroleum reserve. And we stand ready to do more if necessary, united with our allies. These steps will help blunt gas prices here at home, but I know news about what's happening can seem alarming to all Americans. But I want you to know we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. While it shouldn't have taken something so terrible for people around the world to see what's at stake, now everyone sees it clearly. We see the unity among leaders of nations, a more unified Europe, a more unified West. We see unity among the people who are gathering in cities and large crowds around the world, even in Russia, to demonstrate their support for the people of Ukraine. In the battle between democracy and autocracies, democracies are rising to the moment, and the world is clearly choosing the side of peace and security. This is the real test, and it's going to take time. So let us continue to draw inspiration from the iron will of the Ukrainian people. To our fellow Ukrainian Americans who forged the deep bond that connects our two nations, we stand with you. We stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world. We meet tonight in an America that has lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. The pandemic has been punishing, and so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. I understand, like many of you did. My dad had to leave his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania to find work. So like many of you, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up, it was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. That's when one of the first things I did as president was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. Because people were hurting, we needed to act, and we did. Few pieces of legislation have done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of a crisis. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation and combat COVID-19, delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans. It helped put food on the table. Remember those long lines of cars waiting for hours just to get a box of food put in their trunk. It cut the cost of health care insurance. And as my dad used to say, it gave the people just a little bit of breathing room. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind. Folks, and it worked. It worked. It worked. We created jobs, lots of jobs. In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7 last year, the strongest growth rate in 40 years. And the first step in bringing fundamental change to our economy that hasn't worked for working people in this nation for too long. For the past 40 years, we were told The tax break for those at the top and benefits would trickle down and everyone would benefit. But that trickle-down theory led to a weaker economic growth, lower wages, bigger deficits, and a widening gap between the top and everyone else in nearly a century. Look, Vice President Harris and I ran for office, and I realize we have fundamental disagreements on this, but ran for office with a new economic vision for America. Invest in America, educate Americans, grow the workforce, build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down, because we know when the middle class grows, the poor have a way up and the wealthy do very well. America used to have the best roads, bridges, and airports on earth, and now our infrastructure is ranked 13th in the world. We won't be able to compete for the jobs of the 21st century if we don't fix it. That's why it was so important to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I thank my Republican friends who joined to invest and rebuild America, the single biggest investment in history. It was a bipartisan effort, and I want to thank the members of both parties who worked to make it happen. We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade. And look, it's going to transform America, to put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with the rest of the world, particularly China. I've told Xi Jinping it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. We'll create good jobs for millions of Americans, modernizing roads, airports, ports, waterways, all across America. And we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice. We'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Begin to replace the poisonous lead pipes so every child, every American has clean water to drink at home and at school. We're going to provide affordable, high-speed internet for every American, rural, suburban, urban, and tribal communities. 4,000 projects have already been announced. Many of you have announced them in your districts. And tonight, I'm announcing that this year, we will start fixing over 65,000 miles of highway and 1,500 bridges in disrepair. And folks, when we use taxpayers' dollars to rebuild America, we're going to do it by buying America. Buy American products. Support American jobs. The federal government spends about $600 billion a year to keep this country safe and secure. There's been a law on the books for almost a century to make sure taxpayers' dollars support American jobs and businesses. Every administration, Democrat and Republican, says they'll do it, but we're actually doing it. We'll buy America to make sure everything from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the steel on highway guardrails is made in America from beginning to end. All of it. All of it. But folks, to compete for the jobs of the future, we also need a level playing field with China and other competitors. That's why it's so important to pass the Bipartisan Innovation Act sitting in Congress that will make record investments in emerging technologies and American manufacturing. We used to invest almost 2% of our GDP in research and development. We don't now. China is. Let me give you one example why it's so important to pass. If you travel 20 miles east of Columbus, Ohio, you'll find 1,000 empty acres of land. It won't look like much, but if you stop and look closely, you'll see a field of dreams, the ground on which America's future will be built. That's where Intel, the American company that helped build Silicon Valley, is going to build a $20 billion semiconductor megasite, up to 8 state-of-the-art factories in one place, 10,000 new jobs. And in those factories, the average job about $135,000 a year. Some of the most sophisticated manufacturing in the world to make computer chips the size of a fingertip, that power the world in everyday lives, from smartphones, technology to the internet, technology that's yet to be invented. But that's just the beginning. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, who was here tonight, I don't know where Pat is. Pat, there you go, Pat, stand up. Pat came to see me, and he told me they're ready to increase their investment from $20 billion to $100 billion. That would be the biggest investment in manufacturing in American history. And all they're waiting for is for you to pass this bill. So let's not wait any longer. Send it to my desk, I'll sign it, and we'll really take off in a big way. And folks, Intel is not alone. There's something happening in America. Just look around and you'll see an amazing story. The rebirth of pride that comes from stamping products made in America. The revitalization of American manufacturing. Companies are choosing to build new factories here when just a few years ago they would have gone overseas. That's what's happening. Ford is investing $11 billion in electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country. GM is making the largest investment in its history, $7 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. All told, 369,000 new manufacturing jobs were created in America last year alone. Folks, powered by people I've met like JoJo Burgess from generations of union steelworkers in Pittsburgh, who's here tonight. Where are you, JoJo? There you go. Thanks, buddy. As Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown says, it's time to bury the label Rust Belt. It's time to see what used to be called the Rust Belt become the home of a significant resurgence of manufacturing. And with all the bright spots in our economy, record job growth, higher wages, too many families are struggling to keep up with their bills. Inflation is robbing them of gains they thought otherwise they would be able to feel. I get it. That's why my top priority is getting prices under control. Look, our economy roared back faster than almost anyone predicted. But the pandemic meant that businesses had a hard time hiring enough people because of the pandemic to keep up production in their factories. So you didn't have people making those beams that went into buildings because they were out. The factory was closed. The panic also disrupted the global supply chain. Factories close. When that happens, it takes longer to make goods and get them to the warehouses, to the stores, and prices go up. Look at cars last year. 1/3 of all the inflation was because of automobile sales. There weren't enough semiconductors to make all the cars that people wanted to buy. And guess what? Prices of automobiles went way up, especially used vehicles as well. And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation. Lower your costs, not your wages. And folks, that means make more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, more goods moving faster and cheaper in America, more jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America. Look, economists call this increasing the productive capacity of our economy. I call it building a better America. My plan to fight inflation will lower your cost and lower the deficit. 17 Nobel laureates in economics said my plan will ease long-term inflationary pressures. Top business leaders, and I believe most Americans, support the plan. And here's the plan. First, cut the cost of prescription drugs. We pay more for the same drug produced by the same company in America than any other country in the world. Just look at insulin. 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. In Virginia, I met a 13-year-old boy, the handsome young man standing up there, Joshua Davis. He and his dad both have type 1 diabetes, which means they need insulin every single day. Insulin costs about $10 a vial to make. That's what it costs the pharmaceutical company. But drug companies charge families like Joshua and his dad up to 30 times that amount. I spoke with Joshua's mom. Imagine what it's like to look at your child who needs insulin to stay healthy and have no idea how in God's name you're going to be able to pay for it. What it does to your family, but what it does to your dignity, your ability to look your child in the eye, to be the parent you expect yourself to be. I really mean to think about that. That's what I think about. You know, yesterday, Joshua's here tonight, but yesterday was his birthday. Happy birthday, buddy, by the way. For Joshua and 200,000 other young people with type 1 diabetes, let's cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month so everyone can afford it. And drug companies will do very, very well, their profit margin. While we're at it, I know we have great disagreements on this floor with this. Let's let Medicare negotiate the price of prescription drugs. They already set the price for VA drugs. Look, the American Rescue Plan is helping millions of families with Affordable Care Act plans to save them $2,400 a year on their health premiums. Let's close the coverage gap and make these savings permanent. And second, let's cut energy costs for families, an average of $500 a year by combating climate change. Let's provide an investment tax credits to weatherize your home and your business, to be energy efficient and get a tax credit for it. Double America's clean energy production in solar, wind, and so much more. Lower the price of electric vehicles, saving another $80 a month that you're not going to have to pay at the pump. Folks, the third thing we can do to change the standard of living for hardworking folks is cut the cost of child care. Cut the cost of child care. Folks, if you live in a major city in America, you pay up to $14,000 a year for child care per child. I was a single dad for 5 years, raising 2 kids. I had a lot of help, though. I had a mom, a dad, a brother, and a sister that really helped. But middle class and working folks shouldn't have to pay more than 7% of their income to care for the young children. My plan would cut the cost of child care in half for most families and help parents, including millions of women who left the workforce during the pandemic, because they couldn't afford child care to be able to get back to work, generating economic growth. But my plan doesn't stop there. It also includes home and long-term care, more affordable housing, pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. All these will lower costs to families. And under my plan, nobody, let me say this again, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in new taxes. Not a single penny. I may be wrong, but my guess is if we took a secret ballot in this floor, that we'd all agree that the present tax system ain't fair. We have to fix it. I'm not looking to punish anybody, but let's make corporations and wealthy Americans start paying their fair share. Look, last year, and like Chris Coons and Tom Carper and my distinguished Congresswoman, we come from the land of corporate America. There are more corporations incorporated in America than every other state in America combined. And I still won 36 years in a row. The point is, even they understand they should pay just a fair share. Last year, 55 of the Fortune 500 companies earned $40 billion in profit and paid zero in federal taxes. Now look, it's not fair. That's why I proposed the 15% minimum tax rate for corporations. We've got, and that's why in the G7 and other meetings overseas, we're able to put together, I was able to be somewhat helpful, 130 countries agree on a global minimum tax rate. So companies can't get out of paying their taxes at home by shipping jobs and factories overseas. It'll raise billions of dollars. That's why I propose closing loopholes for the very wealthy who pay a lower tax rate than a teacher and a firefighter. So that's my plan, but we'll go in more detail later. We will grow the economy, lower the cost of families. So what are we waiting for? Let's get this done. We all know we've got to make changes. Folks, and while you're at it, confirm my nominees for the Federal Reserve, which plays a critical role in fighting inflation. My plan will not only lower costs and give families a fair shot, it will lower the deficit. The previous administration not only ballooned the deficit with those tax cuts for the very wealthy and corporations, it undermined the watchdogs, the job of those to keep pandemic relief funds being wasted. Remember we had those debates about whether or not those watchdogs should be able to see every day how much money was being spent, where was it going to the right place? But in my administration, the watchdogs are back. And we're going to go after the criminals who stole billions of relief money meant for small business and millions of Americans. Tonight, I'm announcing that the Justice Department will soon name a chief prosecutor for pandemic fraud. And look, I think we all agree, thank you. By the end of this year, the deficit will be down to less than half of what it was before I took office. The only president ever to cut the deficit by more than $1 trillion in a single year. Lowering your cost also meant demanding more competition. I'm a capitalist, but capitalism without competition is not capitalism. Capitalism without competition is exploitation. It drives up profits. And corporations have to compete. Their profits go up and your prices go up when they don't have to compete. Small businesses and family farmers and ranchers, I need not tell some of my Republican friends from those states. Guess what? You got 4 basic meat packing facilities. That's it. You play with them or you don't get to play at all. And you pay a hell of a lot more. A hell of a lot more because there's only 4. See what's happening with ocean carriers moving goods in and out of America. During the pandemic, about half a dozen or less foreign-owned companies raised prices by as much as 1,000% and made record profits. Tonight, I'm announcing a crackdown on those companies overcharging American businesses and consumers. And folks, and as Wall Street firms take over more nursing homes, quality in those homes has gone down and costs have gone up. That ends on my watch. Medicare is going to set higher standards for nursing homes and make sure your loved ones get the care they deserve and that they inspect and they will look at closely. We're also going to cut costs to keep the economy going strong and giving workers a fair shot, provide more training and apprenticeships, hire them based on skills, not just their degrees. Let's pass the Paycheck Fairness Act and paid leave. Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and extend the child tax credit so no one has to raise a family in poverty. Let's increase Pell Grants, increase our historic support for HBCUs, and invest in what Jill, our First Lady who teaches full-time, calls America's best-kept secret, community colleges. Look, let's pass the PRO Act. When a majority of workers want to form a union, they shouldn't be able to be stopped. When we invest in our workers and we build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out together, we can do something we haven't done in a long time, build a better America. For more than 2 years, COVID has impacted every decision in our lives and the life of this nation. And I know you're tired, frustrated, and exhausted. That doesn't even count the close to 1 million people who sit at a dining room table or a kitchen table and look at an empty chair because they lost somebody. But I also know this, because of the progress we've made, because of your resilience and the tools that we have been provided by this Congress, tonight I can say we're moving forward safely back to more normal routines. We've reached a new moment in the fight against COVID-19, where severe cases are down to a level not seen since July of last year. Just a few days ago, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a new mask guidelines. Under the new guidelines, most Americans and most of the country can now go mask-free. And based on projections, more of the country will reach a point across the next couple of weeks. And thanks to the progress we've made in the past year, COVID-19 no longer need control our lives. I know some are talking about living with COVID-19, but tonight I say that we never will just accept living with COVID-19. We'll continue to combat the virus as we do other diseases. And because this virus mutates and spreads, we have to stay on guard. And here are 4 common sense steps as we move forward safely, in my view. First, stay protected with vaccines and treatments. We know how incredibly effective vaccines are. If you're vaccinated and boosted, you have the highest degree of protection. We'll never give up on vaccinating more Americans. Now, I know parents with kids under 5 are eager to see their vaccines authorized for their children. Scientists are working hard to get that done. We'll be ready with plenty of vaccines if and when they do. We're all ready. We are also ready with antiviral treatments. If you get COVID-19, the Pfizer pill reduces your chances of ending up in the hospital by 90%. I've ordered more pills than anyone in the world has. Pfizer is working overtime to get us 1 million pills this month and more than double that next month. And now we're launching the Test to Treat initiative. So people can get tested at a pharmacy, and if they prove positive, receive the antiviral pills on the spot at no cost. And folks, if you're immunocompromised or have some other vulnerability, we have treatments and free high-quality masks. We're leaving no one behind or ignoring anyone's needs as we move forward. On testing, we've made hundreds of millions of tests available, and you can order them for free to your doorstep. And we've already ordered free tests. If you already ordered free tests tonight, I'm announcing you can order another group of tests. Go to covidtest.gov starting next week, and you can get more tests. Second, we must prepare for new variants. Over the past, we've gotten much better at detecting new variants. If necessary, we'll be able to develop new vaccines within 100 days instead of maybe months or years. And if Congress provides the funds we need, we'll have new stockpiles of tests, masks, pills ready if needed. I can't promise a new variant won't come, but I can promise you we'll do everything within our power to be ready if it does. Third, we can end the shutdown of schools and businesses. We have the tools we need. It's time for America to get back to work and fill our great downtowns again with people. People working from home can feel safe and begin to return to their offices. We're doing that here in the federal government. The vast majority of federal workers will once again work in person. Our schools are open. Let's keep it that way. Our kids need to be in school. With 75% of adult Americans fully vaccinated and hospitalizations down by 77%, most Americans can remove their masks and stay in the classroom and move forward safely. We achieved this because we provided free vaccines, treatments, tests, and masks. Of course, continuing this costs money, so I'll not surprise you. I'll be back to see you all. And I'm going to soon send a request to Congress. The vast majority of Americans have used these tools and may want again. We may need them again, so I expect Congress, and I hope you'll pass that quickly. Fourth, we'll continue vaccinating the world. We've sent 475 million vaccine doses to 112 countries, more than any nation on earth. We won't stop, because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases. You know, we've lost so much in COVID-19. Time with one another. The worst of all, the loss of life. Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line. See it for what it is, a god-awful disease. Let's stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other for who we are, fellow Americans. Look, we can't change how divided we've been. It was a long time in coming. But we can change how to move forward on COVID-19 and other issues that we must face together. I recently visited New York City Police Department days after the funerals of Officer Wilbur Mora and his partner, Officer Jason Rivera. They were responding to a 9/11 call when a man shot and killed them with a stolen gun. Officer Mora was 27 years old. Officer Rivera was 22 years old. Both Dominican Americans who grew up in the same streets that they later chose to patrol as police officers. I spoke with their families, and I told them that we were forever in debt for their sacrifices and will carry on their mission to restore the trust and safety of every community deserves. Like some of you that have been around for a while, I've worked with you on these issues for a long time. I know what works. Investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided $350 billion that cities, states, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies. Proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers, breaking the cycle of violence and trauma, and giving young people some hope. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect our communities. I ask Democrats and Republicans alike to pass my budget and keep our neighborhoods safe. And we'll do everything in my power to crack down on gun trafficking, of ghost guns that you can buy online, assemble at home, no serial numbers, can't be traced. I ask Congress to pass proven measures to reduce gun violence. Pass universal background checks. Why should anyone on the terrorist list be able to purchase a weapon? Why? Why? And folks, ban assault weapons with high-capacity magazines that hold up to 100 rounds. You think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests? Look, repeal the liability shield. It makes gun manufacturers the only industry in America that can't be sued. The only one. Imagine had we done that with the tobacco manufacturers. These laws don't infringe on the Second Amendment. They save lives. The most fundamental right in America is the right to vote and have it counted. And look, it's under assault. In state after state, new laws have been passed. Not only to suppress the vote, we've been there before, but to subvert the entire election. We can't let this happen. Tonight I call on the Senate to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, pass the John Lewis Act, Voting Rights Act. And while you're at it, pass the Disclose Act so Americans know who's funding our election. Look, tonight, I'd like to honor someone who dedicated his life to serve this country. Justice Breyer, an Army veteran, constitutional scholar, retiring Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Justice Breyer, thank you for your service. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean it. Get up, stand, let them see you. Thank you. And we all know, no matter what your ideology, we all know one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has is nominating someone to serve on the United States Supreme Court. As I did 4 days ago, I've nominated the Circuit Court of Appeals, Ketanji Brown Jackson, one of our nation's top legal minds, who will continue in Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence. A former top litigator in private practice, a former federal public defender, from a family of public school educators and police officers. She's a consensus builder. Since she's been nominated, she's received a broad range of support, including the Fraternal Order of Police and former judges supported by Democrats and Republicans. Folks, if we're to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system. And as you might guess, I think we can do both. At our border, we've installed new technology like cutting-edge scanners to better detect drug smuggling. We've set up joint patrols with Mexico and Guatemala to catch more human traffickers. We're putting in place dedicated immigration judges in a significant larger number so families fleeing persecution and violence can have their cases heard faster, and those who don't legitimately hear can be sent back. We're screening, we're securing commitments, and supporting partners in South and Central America to host more refugees and secure their own borders. We can do all this while keeping lit the torch of liberty that has led a generation of immigrants to this land, my forebears and many of yours. Provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those with temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Revise our laws so businesses have workers they need and families don't wait decades to reunite. It's not only the right thing to do, it's economically smart thing to do. That's why the immigration reform is supported by everyone from labor unions to religious leaders to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Let's get it done once and for all. Folks, advancing liberty and justice also requires protecting the rights of women. The constitutional right affirmed by Roe v. Wade, standing precedent for half a century, is under attack as never before. If you want to go forward, not backwards, we must protect access to health care, preserve a woman's right to choose, and continue to advance maternal health care for all Americans. And folks, for our LGBTQ plus Americans, let's finally get the Bipartisan Equality Act to my desk. The onslaught of state laws targeting transgender Americans and their families, it's simply wrong. And I said last year, especially to our younger transgender Americans, I'll always have your back as your president so you can be yourself and reach your God-given potential. Folks, as I've just demonstrated, while it often appears we do not agree, and that we do agree on a lot more things than we acknowledge. I signed 80 bipartisan bills into law last year, from preventing government shutdowns, to protecting Asian Americans from still too common hate crimes, to reforming military justice, and will soon be strengthening the Violence Against Women Act that I first wrote 3 decades ago. And it's important. It's important for us to show the nation we can come together and do big things. So tonight I'm offering a unity agenda for the nation. 4 big things we can do together, in my view. First, beat the opioid epidemic. There's so much we can do. Increase funding for prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery. Get rid of outdated rules and stop doctors from prescribing treatments. Stop the flow of illicit drugs by working with state and local law enforcement to go after the traffickers. And if you're suffering from addiction, you should know you're not alone. I believe in recovery, and I celebrate the 23 million Americans in recovery. Second, let's take on mental health, especially among our children whose lives and education have been turned upside down. The American Rescue Plan gave schools money to hire teachers and help students make up for lost learning. I urge every parent to make sure your school does just that. They have the money. We can all play a part. Sign up to be a tutor or a mentor. Children were also struggling before the pandemic: bullying, violence, trauma, and the harms of social media. As Frances Haugen, who is here tonight with us, has shown, we must hold social media platforms accountable for the national experiment they're conducting on our children for profit. Folks, thank you. Thank you for the courage you showed. It's time to strengthen privacy protections, ban targeted advertising to children, demand tech companies stop collecting personal data on our children, and let's get all Americans the mental health services they need. More people can turn for help and full parity between physical and mental health care if we treat it that way in our insurance. Look, The third piece of that agenda is support our veterans. Veterans are the backbone and the spine of this country. They're the best of us. I've always believed that we have a sacred obligation to equip those we send to war and care for those in their family when they come home. My administration is providing assistance in job training, housing, and now helping lower-income veterans get VA care debt-free. And our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan have faced many dangers, one being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 40 times. These burn pits that incinerate waste, the waste of war, medical and hazardous material, jet fuel, and so much more. And they come home, many of the world's fittest and best trained warriors in the world. Never the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Bo Biden. I don't know for sure if the burn pit that he lived near, that his hooch was near in Iraq and earlier than that in Kosovo, is the cause of his brain cancer, the disease of so many other troops. But I am committed to find out everything we can, committed to military families like Danielle Robinson from Ohio, the widow of Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson. He was born a soldier, Army National Guard, combat medic in Kosovo and Iraq, stationed near Baghdad, just yards from burn pits the size of football fields. Danielle is here with us tonight. They love going to Ohio State football games. And he loved building Legos with their daughter. But cancer from prolonged exposure to burn pits ravaged Heath's lungs and body. Danielle says Heath was a fighter to the very end. He didn't know how to stop fighting, and neither did she. Through her pain, she found purpose to demand that we do better. Tonight, Danielle, we are going to do better. The VA is pioneering new ways of linking toxic exposure to disease, already helping more veterans get benefits. And tonight, I'm announcing we're expanding eligibility to veterans suffering from 9 respiratory cancers. I'm also calling on Congress to pass a law to make sure veterans devastated by toxic exposure in Iraq and Afghanistan finally get the benefits and the comprehensive health care they deserve. And fourth and last, let's end cancer as we know it. This is personal. This is personal to me and to Jill and to Kamala and so many of you. So many of you have lost someone you love. Husband, wife, son, daughter, mom, dad. Cancer is the #2 cause of death in America, second only to heart disease. Last month, I announced the plan to supercharge the cancer moonshot that President Obama asked me to lead 6 years ago. Our goal is to cut cancer death rates by at least 50% over the next 25 years, and I think we can do better than that. Turn cancers from death sentences into treatable diseases. More support for patients and their families. To get there, I call on Congress to fund what I called ARPA-H, Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, patterned after DARPA in the Defense Department. Projects that led in DARPA to the internet, GPS, and so much more that make our forces more safer and be able to wage war with more clarity. ARPA will have a singular purpose: to drive breakthroughs in cancer, Alzheimer's and diabetes, and more. A unity agenda for the nation. We can do these things. It's within our power, and I don't see a partisan edge to any one of those four things. My fellow Americans, tonight, we've gathered in this sacred space, a citadel of democracy, in this Capitol. Generation after generation of Americans have debated great questions amid great strife and have done great things. We fought for freedom, expanded liberty, debated totalitarianism and terror. We built the strongest, freest, and most prosperous nation the world has ever known. Now is the hour, our moment of responsibility, our test of resolve and conscience, of history itself. It is in this moment that our character of this generation is formed. Our purpose is found. Our future is forged. Well, I know this nation. We'll meet the test, protect freedom and liberty, expand fairness and opportunity, and we will save democracy. As hard as those times have been, I'm more optimistic about America today than I've been my whole life, because I see the future that's within our grasp, because I know there's simply nothing beyond our capacity. We're the only nation on earth that has always turned every crisis we faced into an opportunity. The only nation that can be defined by a single word: possibilities. So on this night, on our 245th year as a nation, I've come to report on the state of the nation, the State of the Union. And my report is this: the State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. We are stronger today. We are stronger today than we were a year ago. And we'll be stronger a year from now than we are today. This is our moment to meet and overcome the challenges of our time. And we will, as one people, one America, the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Go get him.
All right, President Biden wrapping up his State of the Union address before the joint session of Congress there tonight. We're going to go over a few of the things that the president talked about tonight. He spoke for just about an hour, just over an hour, a couple of minutes past an hour. He spent quite a long time talking about Russia, about 12 minutes or so. A few things announced: closing American airspace to all Russian flights. That was some pretty big news, saying he was joining our allies there. He said he's going to appoint a chief prosecutor for pandemic fraud to deal with pandemic fraud specifically. Also announcing the test to treat program that will make those antiviral COVID pills available at pharmacies for free on the spot. He also announced what he called the unity agenda to beat the opioid epidemic. Take on mental health with a focus on children, support our veterans, and end cancer as we know it, as the president calling for things that he thinks both parties can support that, aren't really controversial. So let's cut back to President as he makes his way out of the House of Representatives now, again, after speaking just over an hour. He, again, spent much of the time talking about, or at least the beginning of the speech, talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He said Vladimir Putin badly miscalculated. He said Putin has no idea what's coming. The president promised to defend every inch of NATO territory. He talked about the 60 million barrels of the world's oil reserves that have now been released, including 30 million barrels of U.S. reserves. And he told Americans, quote, "We're going to be okay." He tried to reassure Americans that he thinks that everything will be okay.
Great job.
Besides, we got the best damn generals in the world. I'll tell you what. everything you say, as you know. Good to see you, man.
And again, we're just seeing the president here as he just talked with General Mark Milley, you saw there. And obviously such a tense time. We are awaiting the Republican response. We will bring that to you live. Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa will deliver the Republican rebuttal from Des Moines. So again, we will carry that live for you.
We can do that.
Prescription drugs.
And
Thank you, Justice.
And we're going to talk about the responses, the official responses here. Again, the official Republican rebuttal will come from Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, but there are three other responses to the State of the Union yet that you see here. Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, she is part of the squad, the liberal squad that it's often referred to. She is going to be delivering a response for the Working Families Party, a progressive party. And then Representative Colin Allred of Texas will deliver a response from the Congressional Black Caucus. And then there is also a response from the House Problem Solvers Caucus with Representatives Josh Gottheimer, he is a Democrat from New Jersey, and then Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. So they are trying to come together, as they say, a nonpartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. We will certainly carry the Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds for you here as soon as it happens. And then we'll try to carry some of those other responses for you as well if we're able to get to them all. They might be happening simultaneously. You see here President Biden.
I know those are the days. She's a great.
Trying to listen in to see if we could hear anything he's saying to Justice Stephen Breyer, who he called out in his speech talking about the Supreme Court, thanking Justice Breyer for his service. And then also, of course, talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson, the woman who he has nominated to be the next Supreme Court justice, who would become the first black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court.
and changes.
You know, today was our first full day in Washington, D.C. without masks since I guess it was the end of November, and I wasn't quite sure.
Test positive in a pharmacy, for example, that they would then be able to be prescribed that antiviral pill right there on the spot. The president also said you can now order more COVID-19 tests, at-home tests, if you would like. Remember, they were limited to 4 per household, but the president said starting later this week that you can go to covidtest.gov and now order more of those tests. Obviously, there was some criticism that those tests were a little too late for the latest Omicron wave that has seemed to have subsided quite a bit now. But the president said in case there are more variants that we can do all that we can to try to prepare for those variants. And this way you can order more tests for your household, for your family if you'd like. The president talked about gun violence, community policing, getting more money for community policing initiatives and grants. He said we should not abandon our streets. He also got a pretty raucous applause for saying not to defund the police, but to fund them was a big part of his message when talking about gun violence and the need for more money for law enforcement. He got another big round of bipartisan applause when talking about the border, secure our border and fix our immigration system. He said there was at least one chant I heard, a build the wall chant, that was kind of mixed in with that as well. He's taking some more selfies here.
From the Ukrainian embassy, for you and for yourself.
I love this lady.
Again, we saw the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. was one of the featured guests, sitting with the First Lady. And she received a standing ovation as the president talked about the U.S. commitment to Ukraine. By the way, we do expect the Republican rebuttal to begin in about 8 minutes at 10:30 Eastern Time. So stand by for that, the Republican response to the State of the Union. This was President Biden's first State of the Union address, even though he did speak to a joint session of Congress last year, shortly after taking office. But it's not unusual for that speech shortly after taking office not to be called a State of the Union because the president had just kind of delivered that inaugural address. So even though that was a joint session last year, this is officially the president's first State of the Union. And it comes at a time when his approval rating has dropped pretty low to about 41% going into tonight. If you average the polling, about 54% of Americans disapprove. So more people disapprove of Joe Biden's job performance going into tonight's speech than they do approve, with the net approval rating of about minus 13. Only one president went into a State of the Union speech with a lower net approval rating, and that was President Trump. And before that was President Obama. So seems like approval ratings going down in general as America seems to be more divided in recent years.
I just came back from Ukraine, so. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Please look at me. I do, yeah.
The president also talked about what he called the unity agenda, and there were 4 things that he talked about. Number 1, beat the opioid epidemic. He said through a series of treatment and prevention and treatment measures. He also said to take on mental health with a focus on children, especially after and during the pandemic, and how their worlds have been upended. The president talked about social media being a big part of that equation, not just for kids, but for adults too, and reining in social media companies and kind of holding them responsible for the effects that they have on mental health of Americans. And he had Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower, was another featured guest of the White House that cut to her during that part of the speech. The third part of his unity agenda, supporting veterans with more benefits announced for veterans with certain types of cancers that are linked to burn pits, which have been very toxic places that in recent years have gotten more attention about leading potentially to cancers in veterans. So he talked about that, and then saying too to just end cancer as we know it with that cancer moonshot program, talking more about trying to put more resources on cancer treatment and research to end cancer as we know it. And we'll take you back into the House, back to the House floor as the president's posing for a few more selfies and pictures as he's getting closer to leaving the chamber.
Now, he's got something on you guys. You better be careful. He's got the... Now, I've been around so long, I remember when not only Houston, not only Austin, but Houston was all blue. They were good old days.
Thank you, sir.
Turn around, go get a mug.
Oh, that's a great shot. Yeah.
Thank you, Survivors out. With you, South Carolina.
Thank you.
Okay, now I can read.
Okay.
That's clear.
Great job. What's your name? Mark.
Excuse me.
Thank you. How are you?
How are you, Mr. President?
Well, thanks for smiling.
No, oh, I was inspired tonight.
Is that a belt, Chelsea?
That's where it's supposed to be.
Divine night.
There you go, man.
All right, and here you see it. President Biden has officially now left the House chamber, and it's cleared out pretty quickly there as well tonight. So again, in just about 3 minutes or so is when we are scheduled to get the Republican response from Kim Reynolds, who is, again, the governor of Iowa. She is expected to talk a lot about just kind of what she's done in her state. She's kind of a rising star in Republican circles and could be talked about for some potential VP consideration. Is potentially what could come if she does well during this portion of the rebuttal. It's traditionally a really tough spot to be in. It's kind of a make or break moment in the past for whoever delivers the rebuttal to the president from either party. Depending, it's helped out folks and hurt folks in both parties over the years. So we're standing by to see how Kim Reynolds does. Speaking from Des Moines, she just signed in the last couple of days a flat tax, 3.9% flat tax for the people of Iowa. Got a lot of attention for that. She was one of the governors to really push no masks in schools and getting schools reopened. So it's expected that she's going to talk about that, touting how she kind of led the way in those initiatives during the pandemic. So we will stand by to hear about that as well and see exactly what she's going to talk about. Let's show those rebuttals one more time. Again, that is just one of the 4 rebuttals out there. Obviously, with social media these days, a lot of folks can stream their own rebuttals at this point. So again, the official Republican response coming from Iowa's Kim Reynolds. And then Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who is known as being a member of the Squad. She is giving a response kind of representing the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the Working Families Party. Some Democrats likened her response as keying your own car, saying it is counterproductive for her to be delivering a rebuttal to a Democratic president. But that is what she is doing tonight. And then again, the Congressional Black Caucus, Representative Colin Allred of Texas delivering a response, and the House Problem Solvers Caucus also delivering a response, a bipartisan response, with a Democrat, Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, and Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. He is the Republican from Pennsylvania, as they are delivering that together. Again, we're going to kind of bounce around. If we can show you some of these, we're definitely going to have the Republican response here, and should be starting any moment now. We do have a live feed coming in. Don't see the governor of Iowa just yet, so stand by with us as we wait for her to begin and see what that is going to look like. So this is what we are standing by for now. And just while we're waiting, just wanted to recap some of the bigger announcements that we weren't sure exactly. The White House releases some excerpts ahead of time, but they did not talk about all of this. A big headline here: closing American airspace to all Russian flights, and that will apparently soon happen. President Biden announced tonight. He said the U.S. is going to join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding an additional squeeze on their economy. And that was a quote from the speech, which would basically prohibit planes owned or registered by Russians from flying over the United States. So we don't really know when that ban will go into place. But we will have to see. President Putin previously retaliated against the European ban by canceling flights over Russian territory from European airlines. So it could be that President Putin will kind of do the same thing and ban American planes from flying over Russian airspace. So that was one development tonight. The president also announcing a chief prosecutor for pandemic fraud. And this is a couple of things. Number one, identity theft, people who were trying to steal money. All right, let's get the governor of Iowa. Looks like she is ready. Here's Kim Reynolds.
Good evening. I'm Kim Reynolds, governor of the great state of Iowa. Like you, I just watched the president's address. I listened as the governor of our state, as a mom and a grandmother of 11 who's worried our country is on the wrong track. We're now 1 year into his presidency, and instead of moving America forward, it feels like President Biden and his party have sent us back in time to the late 70s and early 80s, when runaway inflation was hammering families, a violent crime wave was crashing our cities, and the Soviet Army was trying to redraw the world map. Even before taking the oath of office, the president told us that he wanted to, quote, make America respected around the world again, and to unite us here at home. He's failed on both fronts. The disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal did more than cost American lives. It betrayed our allies and emboldened our enemies. North Korea is testing missiles again at an alarming rate. The Speaker of the House recently warned our Olympic athletes not to speak out against China. And now Russia has launched an unprovoked, full-scale military invasion of Ukraine, an attack on democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. Now all Americans must stand united in solidarity with the brave people of Ukraine as they courageously defend their country against Putin's tyranny as they fight for their freedom. But we shouldn't ignore what happened in the run-up to Putin's invasion, waiving sanctions on Russian pipelines while eliminating oil production here at home, focusing on political correctness rather than military readiness, reacting to world events instead of driving them. Weakness on the world stage has a cost, And the president's approach to foreign policy has consistently been too little, too late. It's time for America to once again project confidence. It's time to be decisive. It's time to lead. But we can't project strength abroad if we're weak at home. And that's what I want to discuss with you tonight. The president and Democrats in Congress have spent the last year either ignoring the issues facing Americans or making them worse. They were warned that spending trillions would lead to soaring inflation. They were told that their anti-energy policies would send gas prices to new heights, but they plowed ahead anyway, raising the price at the pump by 50% and pushing inflation to a 40-year high. 4 decades ago, when our nation was last reeling from inflation, I was a young working mom just starting out. My husband, Kevin, worked days while I watched our girls, and then we would literally switch. We would pass in the yard as he was coming home, and I was leaving to work evenings at the local grocery store. From across that checkout counter, I saw the pain of inflation on my neighbors' faces. I saw what happens when prices rise faster than wages. The Biden administration believes inflation is a, quote, high-class problem. I can tell you, it's an everybody problem. I saw moms and dads' paychecks buy them less and less. I watched working people choose which essentials to take home and which ones to leave behind. And now President Biden's decisions have a whole new generation feeling that same pain. When I took the oath of office 5 years ago, I promised Iowans that I would never lose sight of who I was working for, that I wouldn't become detached from the problems they were facing, from the problems that I had faced myself. But you don't have to check groceries to see what high inflation does to people. You just need to step outside of the DC bubble. Talk to Americans about what's on their mind. Ask them, what are your concerns? What keeps you up at night? And they'll tell you. And I can tell you what's not on that list. They won't tell you that spending trillions more and bankrupting their children is the answer to their problems. They won't tell you that we should be paying people not to work. And they certainly won't tell you that we should give billions in tax giveaways to millionaires and billionaires in Democrat-controlled states like California, New York, and New Jersey. But that's what the Biden administration has been pushing for over the last year. And that's all part of Build Back Better. Thankfully, the president's agenda didn't pass because even members of his own party said enough is enough. Well, the American people share that view. Enough is enough. And it's not just with DC spending. Americans are tired of a political class trying to remake this country into a place where an elite few tell everyone else what they can and cannot say, what they can and cannot believe. They're tired of people pretending the way to end racism is by categorizing everybody by their race. They're tired of politicians who tell parents they should sit down, be silent, and let government control their kids' education and future. Frankly, they are tired of the theater, where politicians do one thing when the cameras are rolling and another when they believe you can't see them, where governors and mayors enforce mandates but don't follow them, where elected leaders tell their citizens to stay home while they sneak off to Florida for sun and fun, where they demand that your child wear a mask, but they go maskless. So you've heard the excuses. They were just holding their breath. But it's the American people who are waiting to exhale, waiting for the insanity to stop. We now live in a country where violent crime is out of control. Liberal prosecutors are letting criminals off easy, and many prominent Democrats still want to defund the police. You know, it seems like everything is backwards. The Biden administration requires vaccines for Americans who want to go to work or protect this country. but not for migrants who illegally cross the border. The Department of Justice treats parents like domestic terrorists, but looters and shoplifters roam free. The American people are left to feel like they're the enemy. This is not the same country it was a year ago. The president tried to paint a different picture tonight, but his actions over the last 12 months don't match the rhetoric. It's not what he promised when he took office. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is an alternative. Across the nation, Republican governors and legislators are showing Americans what conservative leadership looks like, what it means to respect the people we serve, to hear them out, to stand up for them and walk alongside them. We know that our problems require bold action, but we also know that bold action doesn't have to mean government action. It's Americans making their own decisions for their own families and future. Republican governors face the same COVID-19 virus head-on. But we honored your freedoms and saw right away that lockdowns and school closures, they came with their own significant cost, that mandates weren't the answer. And we actually listened to the science, especially with kids in masks and kids in schools. What happened and is still happening to our children over the last 2 years is unconscionable. Learning loss, isolation, anxiety, depression. In so many states, our kids have been left behind, and so many will never catch up. That's why Iowa was the first state in the nation to require that schools open their doors. I was attacked by the left, I was attacked by the media, but it wasn't a hard choice. It was the right choice. And keeping schools open is only the start of the pro-parent, pro-family revolution that Republicans are leading in Iowa and states across this country. Republicans believe that parents matter. It was true before the pandemic, and it has never been more important to say out loud. Parents matter. They have a right to know and to have a say in what their kids are being taught. Families also have every right to live in a safe and a secure community, and that begins with a safe and secure country. But the Biden administration has refused to secure our border. They've refused to provide the resources to stop human trafficking, to stop the staggering influx of deadly drugs coming into our neighborhoods. They've refused to protect you. With Texas and Arizona leading the way, I, along with Republican governors from several states, have sent resources to the border. And we've actually gone to the border, something that our president and vice president have yet to do since taking office. On the economy, the contrast couldn't be more stark. While Democrats in D.C. are spending trillions, sending inflation soaring, Republican leaders around the country are balancing budgets and cutting taxes because we know that money spent on Main Street is better than money spent on bureaucracy. Today, I signed legislation that eliminates Iowa's tax on retirement income and sets our tax rate at 3.9%. That's less than half of what it was just 4 years ago. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that out of the top 20 states with the lowest unemployment rates, 17 have Republican governors. Republicans may not have the White House, but we're doing what we can to fill the leadership vacuum. And on the issues that are affecting Americans, Republicans are leading. We're standing up for parents and kids. We're standing up for life. We're keeping our communities safe and thanking those in uniform. We're fighting to restore America's energy independence, and that includes biofuels. We're getting people back to work, not paying them to stay home. Most of all, we're respecting your freedom. Behind me stands Iowa's Capitol, where we display our state motto, Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain. And those aren't just empty words. It's a belief that the greatness of this state and this country lies in our people, not government. You shouldn't have to wake up every morning and worry about the next thing the government is going to do to you, your business, or your children. If we as elected leaders are doing our job, then the government is working well, but operating in the background. It's supporting the ingenuity and spirit of our people, not drowning them out. It's keeping them safe, not restricting their freedom. That's what I believe, that's what Republicans believe, and that's what Republicans are doing. I am so blessed to be the governor of Iowa, where people are humble, hardworking, and patriotic. We take care of each other. And yes, we are, as they say, Iowa nice. But you don't have to be from Iowa to see that those are the values of America at its best. All of America. Over the last few years, I've put my faith in Iowans, and they haven't let me down. I encourage this president to do the same, to put his faith in you, the American people, who have never wavered in your belief in this country, regardless of who leads it. Because you know, you've shown that the soul of America isn't about who lives in the White House. It's men and women like you in every corner of this nation who are willing to step up and take responsibility for your communities, for your neighbors, and ultimately for yourselves. By that most important measure at least, the state of our union is indeed strong. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
All right, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds delivering the Republican response from Des Moines, basically calling out President Biden in several different ways and saying that Republicans can do it better, offering a conservative alternative, basically, in Republican leadership, talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal. One of the first things that the governor mentioned, talking about how she said we can't portray strength or project strength across the world when we are weak at home, talking about the president's failed Build Back Better agenda, taking a shot saying that a couple of members of his own party are what doomed that agenda, basically, talking about inflation hitting a 40-year high, talking about violent crime, and then kind of touting the success that she has had in Iowa by trying to keep mask mandates out of schools and keep kids in school, basically, during the pandemic, and then talking about what she is doing by implementing that flat tax rate of 3.9% for Iowans. So that was the Republican response. While we have you here, we do have some other responses. One more that is underway right now. It's Representative Rashida Tlaib. She is, again, representing now the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and she is speaking live. We'll play this from the beginning for you as well. She represents Michigan. Let's listen in.
Woman Rashida Tlaib, and I am the proud daughter of Palestinian immigrant parents that grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, city of Detroit. I am honored to be with all of you tonight to elevate the voices of our families and our communities across the country that continue to be left behind. As the mother of 2 boys and the eldest of 14 children, I have been taking care of people all my life. My service in Congress is guided by my roots. That's why I'm committed to standing up for our communities that just want the opportunity to thrive. In the richest country in the world, it shouldn't be this hard for so many to have a good life. Tonight, I am proud to deliver a response on behalf of the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party is a voice for the multiracial working class, fighting for a nation that cares for all of us. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm also part of the Working Families Party because I believe that our government must be 6 million across the world. It also threw tens of millions of Americans, our neighbors, out of work, and it exposed our inhumane, profit-driven healthcare system as our essential workers were pushed to the breaking point and hospitals ran out of beds. When President Biden took office just over a year ago, he took action. He started getting shots in arms. He acted quickly to deliver emergency relief. Congress approved direct relief checks. We helped our working parents. We stopped evictions. We sent resources to our schools and our local and state governments. We showed the potential of an administration and Congress that can act together at the scale of the challenges we all face. We showed how our government can be in the service of the working class majority, not just the wealthy few. And it worked. President Biden and Congress stopped what could have been an economic freefall. Not a single Republican, not one, voted for the relief package. We created 6 million new jobs, and I am inspired to see empowered workers demanding fair wages, stronger benefits, and human dignity. After the emergency response, we had a chance to do so much more. So when President Biden laid out the visionary Build Back Better agenda to create an America where we all have an opportunity to thrive, people got excited. We had a chance to begin to address decades of rising inequality and injustice. President Biden's Build Back Better brought people together. We saw for the first time people who want to see childcare in the same room with those combating climate change. Folks working on housing justice in the same room as those working on health care. The president did that. Build Back Better did that. Build Back Better increases access to health care and lowers prescription drug cost. It funds home and community-based care for our elders and people with disabilities. Each of these investments would be life-changing. It also fights climate change with major investments in clean renewable energy, green jobs, and clean water that would transform our communities. It would uplift our nation by preserving and building affordable housing and investing in our children and families with affordable childcare, universal pre-K, paid leave, and free community college. And these are popular investments that would be paid for by making the wealthy and giant corporations pay their fair share. No one fought harder for President Biden's agenda than progressives. We rallied together with our supporters, held town halls in our communities, engaged new people, and we even played hardball in Congress. But two forces stood in the way. A Republican Party that serves only the rich and the powerful, and just enough corporate-backed Democratic obstructionists to help them succeed. Some important parts of the president's agenda became law with the infrastructure bill, but we campaigned on doing even more. Roads and bridges are critical, but so are childcare and prescription drugs, and we shouldn't have to choose. People like India Beckham, a mother of 7 children in my district, who is the sole provider for her family. The expanded child tax credit helped her catch up on bills and meet her family's basic needs. But now that lifeline is gone, and we can't give up on her and millions of people like her. With the majority of the Build Back Better agenda stalled, Mr. President, our work is unfinished. But we are ready to jumpstart our work again. We still have time to lower costs for working families and preserve a livable planet for our grandchildren, but we must act now. The super rich got richer during the pandemic, while Ms. Beckham and others face higher costs and new barriers that will forever alter their children's future. I want us to just imagine a government where corporate donors don't drive healthcare, climate, education, and poverty policies, where the working families of our nation really call the shots. It's time. It's time we had a majority in Congress to fight for us, a working families majority. No matter who you are or where you're from, most of us want the same things: a good paying job, a safe community, clean air and water, good schools, and a brighter future for our families. Enough to thrive, not just survive. So what would a working families majority do? We'd work with President Biden to deliver for you and your family. We'd guarantee health care as a basic right, because after 2 years of this pandemic, we can't allow corporate profits to determine who lives and who dies. We'd stand up to big pharma and insurance companies, and we'd make drug prices for life-saving medicine like insulin actually affordable. And we'd make abortion care a fundamental right so that no Supreme Court could ever take it away. We'd pass the End Child Poverty Act that Representative Mondaire Jones and I introduced so that parents like India Beckham and millions more could provide for the basics that every child needs to thrive. We'd fight together for respect for all of our workers. That means a minimum wage of at least $15 an hour that rises with inflation, the freedom to join a union without harassment or intimidation, and paid and family medical leave for our workers. From the baristas at home, in my home community in Great Lakes Coffee, to the teachers in Minnesota, to the Amazon workers in Alabama, workers are speaking up for a voice and dignity on the job. I saw what a union meant for my family growing up, as my father was a member of the United Auto Workers. This smile's because of the UAW. They ensured that our family had access to dental care. So this is our time. This is our time to take on corporate polluters who get rich poisoning us, and we fight for environmental justice. With the Green New Deal, we rebuild our country by creating millions of union jobs in the clean energy industry of the future. Imagine turning the Rust Belt into a green belt that is a center of American jobs and innovation for the next century. And we'd ensure clean air and water, because I know we can't build back better if our children can't live healthy lives. A working family's majority would take on skyrocketing housing costs, which have left 500,000 Americans homeless on any given night, and millions more struggling to pay the rent. That means building millions of accessible, new, affordable homes, and providing long overdue rental, down payment, and home repair assistance. We would provide a real path to citizenship for our people who want nothing more than to contribute to our nation. We would transform our broken immigration system into one where immigrants are welcomed, not vilified. Over the past few days, we have all watched in horror as Russia launched an illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine. We stand with the people of Ukraine. The United States and our allies must work together towards an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic resolution to help save lives. We must pursue targeted sanctions that put pressure on Russia's billionaires, not the everyday Russians who have no choice in this conflict and are courageously protesting the war as we speak. We need a humanitarian response to this crisis, and we must welcome Ukrainian refugees from all walks of life to the United States. And I know we can't seek peace by continuing to spend $750 billion every year on weapons of war, making defense contractors and companies wealthier. We must put human rights and dignity first and prioritize cooperation and diplomacy to address the challenges that no one nation can confront alone, like pandemics and climate change. Nothing is more important than keeping the people we love free from harm. We all deserve to be safe in our neighborhoods. The path to community safety is investing in what people need to thrive, like access to jobs, quality education, and real opportunities. We can't police away homelessness, poverty, or mental health crisis in our country. Care, not more criminalization, is how we ensure lasting safety for all. And we should end the war on drugs, fund legal defense, and enact criminal justice reforms like ending qualified immunity that would transform our discriminatory legal system. And we should add a justice for working people to the Supreme Court by confirming Ketanji Brown Jackson without delay. Over the last 2 years, the richest people in America doubled their wealth. As profits skyrocket, corporations have the nerve to blame inflation while increasing prices on essential goods and services. This is more than simply corporate greed. It's extortion. We need to tax billionaires and mega corporations that dodge their fair share. And we need to fight back against unchecked corporate power that increasingly shape our lives. Those policies I named, they are popular. But we have a system that makes it too easy for elected officials to answer to donors instead of their constituents. Disproportionate representation in the Senate distorts the democratic will of the people. The filibuster, a tool perfected to perfect.
Live, local, now. This is WSFA 12 News at 10.
When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger.
Addressing a concerned nation and anxious world, President Joe Biden has vowed to check Russian aggression in Ukraine.
You watched the president live here on WSFA 12 News in his first State of the Union address. He announced new steps to further isolate Russia from outside its country.
But as we take a live look at the U.S. Capitol tonight, the president's main focus was domestic. From gas prices and inflation to infrastructure and the pandemic, the president addressing a number of topics in hopes of rebooting his stalled domestic agenda. Alice Barr has the latest developments.
Madam Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Biden stepping into a full House chamber for his first State of the Union address, knowing his words reach far beyond the Capitol at this defining moment in history.
We, the United States of America, stand with the Ukrainian people in the battle between democracy and autocracies. Democracies are rising to the moment.
With the war in Ukraine center stage, the president taking on the threat posed by Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond, but Putin was wrong.
Many lawmakers dressed in Ukraine's yellow and blue as President Biden laid out what the U.S. and allies are doing to help the besieged nation and punish Russia.
Tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy. The Russian economy is reeling, and Putin alone is the one to blame.
On the economy, the president focusing on strong job and GDP growth. But he acknowledged the challenges American families still face, vowing to ease soaring inflation.
My top priority is getting prices under control.
Masks are optional tonight, signaling a shifting phase in the pandemic. The president celebrating progress against COVID and commending the American people.
Thanks to the progress we made in the past year, COVID-19 no longer need control our lives.
Also touting his historic nomination of the first black woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
At a time of deep division in this country and devastating conflict around the world, President Biden seeking a path to unity. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
And minutes after the address, Republicans issued a response, the GOP saying Biden has failed to unite the nation or garner respect from those not already allies to the U.S.
We're now 1 year into his presidency, and instead of moving America forward, it feels like President Biden and his party have sent us back in time to the late 70s and early 80s, when runaway inflation was hammering families, a violent crime wave was crashing our cities, and the Soviet Army was trying to redraw the world map.
Alabama lawmakers have started to weigh in on the address. U.S. Senator Richard Shelby saying in part, quote, during President Biden's first State of the Union address, he spoke of unity and bipartisan cooperation. However, I have yet to see Democrats attempt to pass sensible legislation that's palatable to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Well, we've got a breaking news update now, the latest on that Ukrainian and Russian conflict. Russian forces continue to escalate their attacks in civilian areas now of Ukraine. Russia previously had been attacking only military targets. The latest aspect of the invasion saw missiles hit the central square in Ukraine's second biggest city. We also saw that big television tower bombed in Kyiv.
It failed to conquer our cities from the ground. We destroyed many of their tanks, armored vehicles heading to the big cities like Kharkiv and Kiev. So now they launched indiscriminate shelling of our cities to break us down, to destroy the will to fight.
Ukraine's military is putting up more of a fight than some had expected. Officials say no major city in the country has fallen yet to the control of the Russian troops. Russia's invasion has hit especially close to home for a man right here in central Alabama. 85-year-old Simon Paulenko was born in Ukraine in 1936 and was a child when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. Tonight, he lives in Prattville. He spoke with WSFA 12 News reporter Ashley Bowerman.
Having lived through it, it's very easy to understand what is happening right now. Siblings have...
Simon Paulenko was a young boy when his family's farm in Ukraine was seized by the Germans during World War II. He remembers being forced to relocate to the country as farm laborers were needed.
We had to put everything we could on a wagon.
Once in Germany, he recalls sheltering from the large-scale bombing of that country.
The buildings were bombed out. Some were burning. Mother and I had to track around that and walk 5 miles to where we lived.
He compares the devastation he witnessed then to Russia's war on Ukraine now.
It was then under Stalin and Hitler. Now it's under Putin. Same thing, but atrocities of war are unbelievable to overcome.
Paulenko has family currently living in Kyiv, trying to overcome. Right now, he's praying for peace and more support for his home country that is still fighting for freedom decades later.
The key point is to get Ukraine free again of what they were. If they're taking over communists, goodbye Ukraine. They will be slaves to the communistic regime, and it's not a pleasant situation to be in. Right in here.
In Prattville, Ashley Bowerman, WSFA 12 News.
Governor Ivey tonight proclaimed a day of prayer for Ukraine. That will be tomorrow. She is urging everyone of faith in Alabama to pray for peace.
Inside Alabama's legislature, the Alabama House of Representatives has approved a resolution condemning Russia for their military invasion of Ukraine and expressing support for the people of Ukraine. The resolution was sponsored by Representative Gil Isabel, and each member of the House signed on as a co-sponsor. The resolution calls on Alabamians to disfavor or ban anything Russian. Isabel says he hopes the sanctions President Joe Biden imposes on Russia will be severe.
Unfortunately, it will affect the Russian people, but when the Russian government does what they have done, we need to take the stand and let them know it is wrong.
The resolution now heads to the Senate. Also today, a House committee debated the $8.1 billion Education Trust Fund, which funds all public schools. It's $125 million less than the governor recommended. A vote is expected tomorrow. Meanwhile, a Senate committee approved the Numeracy Act today. It is meant to boost math school scores by giving schools extra money for math coaches and more instructional time for students struggling. That bill now goes to the Senate. New tonight, a Crime Stoppers alert. Dallas County Sheriff's deputies are looking for 34-year-old Tristan Dial. He's wanted on 2 counts of aggravated child abuse. Dial is also wanted in connection to a domestic violence incident in which he was shot by the victim. He's considered armed and dangerous. Call 215-STOP if you've seen him.
New tonight, Southern Baptist Convention President Ed Litton says that he will not seek a second term. The country's largest Protestant denomination has had a turbulent year with internal debates about systemic racism, the role of women in ministry in the Southern Baptist Church, and allegations of mishandled sexual abuse claims. A task force on those claims, appointed by Litton, will issue a report in June. New tonight, we have confirmed with the White House that Vice President Kamala Harris will be traveling to Selma this weekend for the annual Bridge Crossing Jubilee. She'll be there on Sunday to take part in the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Officials have held that ceremony for decades as a way of remembering Bloody Sunday, when voting rights marchers crossed the bridge only to be met by tear gas and billy clubs held by state troopers. Eventually, though, they would be successful with their march to Montgomery. The Voting Rights Act was then passed later that year in 1965. Vice President Harris will be joined by nearly half a dozen secretaries from the Biden administration. 15 years ago today, a national tragedy hit our state.
Next on WSFA 12 News at 10, a monster tornado hit Enterprise, killing some students at the high school. The community remembered the victims today.
Gasoline prices still soaring, but there are some ways you can cut down on your gasoline usage. We'll have some tips to help you save fuel.
And a calm week of Alabama weather is in progress. If you like it, it's going to get even better. Even warmer air is on the way. We'll track that and next week's rain chance coming up. Stay with us.
Tailoring just the right eating plan leads to meaningful achievements. Profile. Healthy living, one win at a time. Start now at profileplan.com. Profile tailors a nutrition plan with personalized goals and one-on-one guidance to help you make meals perfect just for you. Profile. Healthy eating, one win at a time. Start now at profileplan.com.
I'm not trying to hide the fact that I'm an amputee, but I just want to look as pretty and as normal as anybody. I felt like I didn't have a right to ask for that, and that was the biggest difference for me coming to Faru, because they showed me what they can do. Just the freedom to go into a shoe store and say I can have anything I want in the shoe store. Faru did it.
I want a leg that I can put on when I get up in the morning. I want to go to work all day, then I want to go walking with my wife. That's what I enjoy. In my case, I need a little bit extra from someone else, you know, from the prosthetic company, from Faru, to provide me tools so that I can do those things. I want a leg that I can put on and wear it till when I go to bed at night, and that's what I have right now.
Just wanted to try all different kind of things. Mountain biking,